Welcome back to City and State TV. I'm Morgan Pehme, joined by my friend and colleague Gerson Borrero here at the SOMOS 2014 City and State Hub in San Juan. We're joined now by a former Assemblyman-elect, and also a former New York City Council member who was the first Dominican American elected in the United States' history. Guillermo Linares, it's a great pleasure to have you on City and State TV.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Guillermo, you know, the amazing ups and downs that the body politic affords in the process. So I hope you don't mind, but I'm calling you the Dominican comeback kid. So, because it's amazing that after you go through a process of a city council, you go to the assembly, you serve in an administration of a mayor, you become a first, you also serve with President Bill Clinton on an education committee, you get your education degree, and it's like, you know, you're not slowing up and you're not letting time take its course. What is the particular need that Guillermo Linares, the Dominican, that you are from Cabrera, right?
Yes.
Cabrera, Dominican Republic. What is it that pushes you to say, you're already in the history books of the Dominican Republic? So what is it that motivates you? Is it your own need for that sense of accomplishment, or is it the condition that you see the community that has become part of the diaspora of tell us what it is. What is it that makes you take?
I've always been driven by what I felt as part of the community that I arrived to New York City and to the United States, looking to fulfill what all immigrants that have arrived to this country look to, you know, to find a place to show that you, through effort and sacrifice, can earn the welcoming mat of all the other groups that came before. And I've learned a long time ago that perhaps the best way to help realize that for the community that I'm part of, as we arrive in large amount, the Dominican community, the way to say thank you to the country that welcomed you, but more so the communities that help you settle and stand up and, you know, make a difference for your family, but also for the community where you live, is to serve. So I developed what I did first in the classroom as a teacher, serving kids like me when I first arrived here, and there was no bilingual education. There were hardly any Latino teachers. And you were swimming, you know, you had to sink unless you learn how to swim, not knowing the language and having little support. So when I was a teacher, my classroom had over 40 students, newly arrived, and I began serving them, but their families too, in the neighborhood where I was a teacher in Washington Heights. So that was the beginning in the 70s, and my classroom kept getting bigger and bigger because I became a teacher trainer. Then I was going to different schools. I was helping teachers cope with their students, and I got elected to the school board to demand for the community in the area of education by helping people get their documentation, and I was volunteering all my time. So I became a public servant long before I was elected to office. I was 15 years active in the community, mobilizing parents, helping, you know, families knock on doors when they didn't know. And then I got elected, and my classroom got much bigger and much bigger, to the point when Bill Clinton appointed me to chair his Commission on Education in his last 2 years of presidency. My classroom became a national experiment for me as an immigrant representing Latinos throughout the United States in the area of education. And I'm very proud that back then I helped convince President Clinton that dual language was important. More than English was important to retain the language, and he allocated funding for 5,000 dual language schools in the country. Many of them came to New York. I'm very proud of that as a teacher, as a bilingual teacher. And just like I'm proud of being the prime sponsor years later, landing in Albany, of the DREAM Act, because this comes from the heart. As the son of undocumented parents who live in the Lower East Side and then moved to the Bronx. And those green taxis you see in the city of New York, I spent 2 years because I was a driver. So whatever I do and I'm moved by, it goes back to my roots, to what I face myself with so many others. And the reason I feel very excited, and I get that excitement from people who helped me get back to elected office in the last few months, is because I feel that everything that we have invested as Latinos, as New Yorkers, as immigrants, as families trying to make ends meet in difficult times, is at stake now. It's like everything we brought to bear with our small businesses, with our sacrifice working in factories. Now that we're retiring, and we have our young people, they're primed for leadership positions and roles, appointed in both private sector, public sector. There is no, I don't see a master plan. I don't see a strategy where that investment, which is a young, talented professionals that we have, or the entrepreneurs, or let's say the respect we've earned, and I'm not talking about Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, or minorities. I'm talking about we as Americans, whether we've been here many generations or we just landed as the Mexican community has landed more recently. I'm talking about what lies in the future. For us, after we see the last 50 years of struggle, and I come back now to elected office in Albany with a fresh perspective, more mature and selective way of channeling my energies, looking for allies. And I'm talking about people who are committed to help address the challenges that we face, whether they are job creating or creating opportunity for youth. And it needs to involve the private sector in a big way, corporations that have made trillions in profit from consumers that buy their products, and yet what are they giving back? Well, I think that we have to be surgical, because otherwise the kids that are not going to college, and we want them to go to college, but those that are not going to college, I don't want them going to jail or to be in the street doing what will get them to jail or deported. So I want to be surgical. I want to look for allies. I know government cannot do it. The private sector cannot do it. I think we need to do it in the base of communities. So I'm back with a renewed commitment to serve, but in a different way. And so, I feel more energized than ever, because I feel that my experience, combined with the relationship that I built with so many people along the way, are going to be very helpful to me at this point. But again, what I do, the taxi livery legislation was not me. It was the industry and those who the industry serve that supported, and overcame and was able to get this accomplished, facing stiff opposition from very powerful economic forces, the yellow industry and allies. And we did it. I mean, we have to now make sure that the industry really development growth, and is able to um, uh, realize its potential, because it's just in the beginning now. That's a priority for me, along with what's happening with the displacement of our families. The most vulnerable are the families that live the longest in rent-regulated apartments, because they're the target of harassment. They're being chased. There's no service to them. They don't know their rights. They're vulnerable because they retire, and yet, they're on the verge. It's like a tsunami that's already on its way. So I have my priorities clear, and the community brought them to me. I had a sense of them, but I'm clear going back to Albany.
Assemblyman, you talk about your commitment to public service, and one of the things that we've written a great deal about is the epidemic of public corruption in New York State. You left your assembly seat to run for state senate against Senator Espaillat. You were defeated, and Senator Espaillat's protege, Gabriela Rosa, took your seat. She subsequently pleaded guilty to a number of crimes. She is now in prison in disgrace. I mean, does your community feel like this is a deep betrayal from their elected officials? Does this shake their faith in the ability of elected officials to represent them faithfully? And how do you think that we can root out this pestilence of corruption in the legislature?
Well, it concerns me tremendously whenever something adverse happens with those who our community elect. And it's sad, it is regretful, it is painful. And, when I work in the city representing 3 million immigrants, I went to the mayor when we had one of our young people, go to jail, and I said, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I have to resign. I feel I have to go back to the seat that I represented for 10 years, and God knows how hard I worked to hand over, a position that I felt if I fail, I was failing our community. So I can only say, term limits got me out. So I'm a victim of term limits, and when I felt I was primed to really continue to serve the community. And so I went back to do my doctorate and then went to be commissioner. But when my community lost the leader in the city council, I came back. It was not to be. We have another council member. When I ran for Senate, there was a seat that was vacated. There were 2 primaries, one in June, one in September. This is the first time that I know this happened in New York City, or in the country for that matter, that you have 2 overlapping primaries. So when the senator decided to run for Congress and he made his decision, he left open the seat. He abandoned his seat, a seat that I worked very hard in 2002 to try to represent the community. I ran in 2002. So I was preparing to run for that seat again. He decided overnight to run for Congress. So I decided I'm going to run for that seat because I felt it was an important position.
And because he broke his promise to not run for the Senate after he was going to run for Congress.
Exactly. So when you run and you collect signatures and you put yourself on the ballot, you are the candidate. So I was a candidate at the time. He lost, and then he said, I want my seat back, or I want the seat that I left to run for Congress back. So he found a way of getting back into the ballot. We faced each other. He got the majority of the votes, And here we are again. I came back to the seat because I was collecting signatures for the seat because he decided again to run a second time. And the last thing that I thought would happen would be that I would be coming back to my old seat. So I had 9 days to qualify, knowing that I was going to be challenged. My signature were going to be challenged. And they actually filed general objection to try and knock me out. But in those 9 days, I got 2,618 signatures deposited, and that was knocking on doors. So they couldn't really knock me out. And then I worked hard because obviously I needed to get the feeling of the community in terms of how they felt, the challenges they had, and how I could be helpful in addressing those challenges and also seizing the potential. And I'm very proud to have gotten elected after a while, not being around, serving directly in office with an overwhelming support in the primary and with 92% of the voters in the general election. So I'm very pleased. I'm very glad that I wanted to go back to Albany with a voice that will be representing all the constituents in my district, and that's how I wanted to go back. And the message was given: we want you to continue to represent us. I have not let down our community in the many years that I've served, and I think that they recognize that getting me back into the assembly, and I'm going to continue to work hard and even harder than I've had in the past.
You have, with all the history that we know and what you just told us, the insights as to the thought process of how you get back into this, the circus sometimes in Albany. You know how government works. You actually experienced it, you impacted, and sometimes became frustrated by it.
Yes.
You know what happens at the SOMOS conference. You're here now in the Winter Falls Conference in 2014, going into 2015. You know what's going to happen here. There's really very little substance that comes out of here in terms of a specific agenda or, shall we say, a guide to legislation that needs to be addressed. Some of the people some of your colleagues who are already in the assembly, once you're sworn in, take office January 1st, you will have a sharing. You're absorbing, besides your own experience, you're seeing what it is that is being discussed. What do you expect, or what would you like to see different from this conference? Or are you looking for, in addition to what you're taking already, based on your experience and the needs that you see that's still out there, what would you recommend that be the top priority or priorities that at least you're going to follow? Are you going to incorporate some of what you know needs to be done from the different purchases that you've had? Or are you going to try to see if they're already there or add those that they're not seeing? Because you come in with a fresh perspective. You were at the top, you were defeated. I mean, first you lost because you didn't the term limits, but you've been in and out. So you have the perspective of being a winner, but also a loser. And losing is hard, and to rebound. So I call you the Dominican comeback kid, really with a sense of that you did not hold on to office. You were actually ousted, and you found your way back. No, you didn't hold a seat, or somebody held it for you, warming it up to come back. You had to fight it back. So having that respect for the people that actually have faith in you, what do you bring back to Albany to be able to get for these people? I mean, you already stated that thing, but how do you affect the agenda?
I think that there's something that desperately needs to be approached different. And I know it needs to be strategic in nature. I know it cannot be in front of the cameras to announce it to the world, but I know it needs to speak to a few things that are happening to working families, to the children of working families, to the people who are now retiring after dedicating and sacrificing their whole life and have nothing to hold on to. In fact, they can't even survive. So whatever it is that I'm going to look to for allies with in the Assembly, in the Senate, whoever I can, in the executive branch of government, but more so in the private sector with those who understand that it's economic in nature what we have to do, not to be impressive with pieces of legislation that fall in a vacuum, but whatever it is that we're going to execute needs to translate to make a difference for families that are, sinking. You can't wait till next week. If you gotta pay the rent, you gotta. If you're in a shelter, you can't wait. If you have someone harassing you to kick you out because they want to make more money, there's got to be something there. So I am looking for the glue that brings together elements that I want to make a difference, like now, like right away, because we already know that the schools are not producing what they need to produce, so that we feel comfortable with enough of our kids entering college. Never mind those that leave after they enter, because there's nothing there to hold them to get that degree. And there's nothing after they get the degree other than maybe debt that they have. So whether it is the concept of apprenticeship, internships, I am very frustrated with how amazingly young people are opening small businesses as a way of survival, but not because they have access to capital, not because they get technical assistance, not because someone says, let me stop, aggressively enforcing the laws at the state and city level to see if we can get some money that we need, in the city, at the state, at the expense of someone that is going to close the business and we're going to lose jobs. We're not servicing the neighborhood. I mean, there's something wrong with this picture. So I'm looking for allies that can help make some glue, and I'm looking, hopefully that glue will connect some people that are serious about what's going on. And this is not about Latino, Dominican, or Puerto Rican, or white, or black. No. If you are a working class, and you aspire to be middle class, which for me, is what keeps the whole piece together. Those who want to become part of the middle class that are poor, the working class are almost there. And the middle class, you need to, for you to be able to pay a house, to have a car, get away with your family on a vacation. That defines middle class. For me, that is like dissipating. I don't see that as a reality. And so for me, I cannot answer you by saying this is the plan, but I'm looking for allies to work with me to address urgent issues that we have. And this is not right wing or left wing. It's right there and it's facing us. And I hear it from families in the neighborhood the different neighborhoods I represent. But I know it's happening in the city and in the suburbs and in the rest of the country.
And lastly, I wanted to ask you, Gerson wrote a column yesterday saying that in light of the governor creating the Women's Equality Party to call attention to the inequalities that women face in New York State, why should there Latinos come together and form a Latinos Equality Party in New York State to call attention to the issues of concern to the Latino community?
Well, let me just say, you know, in a political process, and you know, I've learned a few, and I have my bumps along the way.
Assemblyman, this is a yes or no question.
But I will tell you, I think the party that we need is the party, the non-nonsense party. And let's begin to put the political maneuvering and machinations and so forth on the side, because that's not going to really bring the bread to the table to families. That's not going to really help our young people with alternatives. I cannot go to a young person that may be doing something wrong in the street and say, stop doing that. I gotta go with a real alternative to that young person. And, you know, so I'm gonna look for allies. They may be affiliated to parties, they may be executives at city and state level or federal level, they may be elected like me, but at the end of the day, what's gonna follow me is what difference does that make to the neighborhood that I represent? And that's the glue I'm looking for. The glue for me is how is this relevant to families that are about, you are sinking and they can wait. You know, it's not, you can't throw a life, you know, I can't throw, families for me, communities for me of all different backgrounds need to take charge, and they're not. Parents are not in charge in the school. Neighbors are not in charge of what's going on with where they live. And small businesses are on their own, sink or swim. There's nothing there. The answer for me is we gotta bring it from the bottom up. And this is not progressive or so-called radical left, no. I know this works because I built schools in Washington Heights, organized in the base. You know, we got a taxi legislation passed and signed by the governor because we mobilized that industry. You know, I got a police precinct in Washington Heights, the most dangerous neighborhood in the city of New York, because we mobilized the community, all communities, to demand that the attention and resources needed there. So for me, it's in the community. Either you believe on it or you just want to give the impression that you are doing. I deal with basics, and for me the basics is the voices that have no one to hear or listen to them, but they have to be the protagonists. They have to be in charge, and that's, to the extent that I can do that, we may have that glue that I'm mentioning to you.
So instead of know-nothing parties, we need a no-nonsense party, according to once and future Assemblyman Guillermo Linares. Thank you so much for joining us on City and State TV.
My pleasure.